In the studio is Republican political strategist Mica Mosbacher and Joel Rubin, who is a former U.S. diplomat. Welcome to both of you. Mica, let me start with you because you work closely with Ted Cruz. It was probably one of the most closely watched senatorial races in U.S. midterm history. The Democratic contender looked like he had a chance, but in the final weeks, the margin was getting wider and wider. Expected result?
Absolutely. We're a ruby red state with an extremely popular Republican governor. However, what was surprising, especially going into the summer months, when we looked at Beto O'Rourke and we saw that he was outraising Ted Cruz 2-1, it was alarming. And what we saw in Texas as a result were 500,000 new voters registered per the Secretary of State's office, and we saw double the election turnout in comparison to 2014. So Beto O'Rourke managed to energize his base. We saw a high percentage of millennials come out and vote. It will be interesting to look at the analysis because millennials normally stay home and it's older people that get out and vote. Also, Texas has the evangelical vote, and they are pro-gun rights, obviously. But you know what we saw with Beto O'Rourke? He skateboarded out on stage during one of his rallies. He acted like a rock star. He had personality, and he appealed to those Democratic-leaning areas in Dallas and also Houston-Harris County. So it's going to be interesting to watch in 2020, especially the Latino vote.
Which I'm going to get to. It's actually very interesting to see sort of a Republican sort of praise the type of campaign that the Democrat Beto O'Rourke actually ran. Joel, let me turn to you. You are a former Democratic congressional candidate. Looking at Beto's campaign, what does this mean moving forward, especially for 2020?
Well, I think with Beto, and I agree, I mean, it was a very hard-fought race. Ted Cruz, clearly the senator, is in sync with the voters of Texas. But what Beto O'Rourke was able to do was to energize a lot of voters that Democrats have been looking to for the last 5 or 6 years. And in fact, he did actually have coattails. There are several key congressional races that flipped to the Democrats against some incumbents in Texas. More to see potentially as well. And so I think the lesson learned here for Democrats is, do they run candidates, or do we run candidates who are strongly progressive and speak to the base voters, and will that be enough? And coming close in Texas is a pretty strong signal that those types of candidates, they can really bring out not only major donations, but also a lot of voters that can flip seats.
Mica, what's one lesson that Ted Cruz learned from all this?
Well, not to take anything for granted. Especially the millennial vote. And secondly, you know, he originally did not endorse Donald Trump at the Republican convention. And that was a huge mistake. It actually did upset a number of voters at the time. Now, he since, you know, had a mea culpa moment and certainly has been voting for the president's policies. But he did lose some traction with Republican voters. So I think that he also realizes that he needs to continue to get out and you know, mix with his voters in New Texas and not look like he's left Texas behind. And I think for a while, people thought that he had an eye on 2020 or beyond and wasn't that focused on Texas.
All right, let's broaden sort of our scope from Texas and look at the country as a whole. Tirtuolo is calling that the Senate will actually stay in the control of the Republicans, but the House has flipped over to the Democrats. What does this mean moving forward?
Well, legislatively, it's going to be quite an interesting couple of years. The Democrats are certainly going to try to put forward an agenda that they can pass through the House, and it will be easy for them to do it because one doesn't need to have a supermajority in the House to get bills through. And they're going to put bills through that will likely challenge the Senate and challenge the president from a messaging perspective as much as from a policy perspective. So we're going to see a lot of internal congressional battles about what the policies will be for the next 2 years.
Mica, I don't have a lot of time, but I want your take on it too.
Well, the president signaled in February that he was willing to work with the Democrats on immigration, and there were 4 different pieces of legislation in the House, and they all failed. So I think that what we will have to do, if we're not going to be gridlocked for the good of America, we're going to have to work across the aisle.
Mica and Joel, thank you very much for coming on.